Anna Calamaro, how are you?
Doing just well. How are you doing?
Oh my God, fantastic. You are 5 weeks away from being ordained,
I think so. I think we're on a 5 week countdown.
but who's counting?
I'm counting the milliseconds.
You realize this is being recorded. Uh, so seriously, how does it feel to be winding down this experience?
Completely surreal. It's when I look back on these 5 years, I mean, it's it's so long that whenever I tell people that I was in rabbinical school for 5 years, they're like, "Why didn't you just become a doctor?"
Oh, the pension's much better. Okay, so you're looking back on that, and what do you get out of that looking back?
Oh my gosh, so much. I mean, every year, every year has given me a new gift, I would say. Even the pandemic years, which were really difficult and in terms of like learning, right? Like school completely changed what it was supposed to be. Um, the ancient sages intended for us to be doing this on Zoom, of course. So like I got a taste of what they wanted.
Very funny.
Um, but yeah, I mean, every year was something different. And I think part of that was because I had different internships each year or different fellowships. And um, every year I like met new people and was learning new things and new classes constantly. So it just, wow, it's been an incredible journey.
So I think I told you once before that when we got to stateside after our year in Israel, I
Mm.
went to my biblical Hebrew class, and Dr. Kaufman started on the very first class, my first year in Cincinnati. And the first thing he said was, everything you learned in Israel, forget about because they were wrong. So, which is
Yeah,
typical HUC, right?
yeah, they're still saying that.
So here's my question for you. When you come to Hakafa, looking back on your 5 years in rabbinical school, what do I have to tell you to erase?
Wow. Hmm. What will I need to erase? Well, I'll start by saying that I think that I've learned that there are different types of Judaism based on where you are in the country.
Mhm.
So, at first I like really wasn't on board with that. And people said things like, oh, that's Los Angeles Judaism or that's coastal Judaism. And I thought, like, how could it be that different? And I suppose there are differences, but um, I think maybe one of my unlearnings will be figuring out what things work in LA that might not work in Chicago, and vice versa. And some of those things might work as well, like they might still work. I'm thinking about, song, for example. I feel like I had the opportunity to hear a lot of different types of music out here, um, in terms of like liturgical music or just any sort of Jewish singing spaces out here. And and some of that might work still in Chicago, and some of it might be like coastal Judaism, if you will. Um, I hate that still, but sure, we'll go with it. Um, that's the first thing that's coming to mind. I think I mean, one of the things that you told me at the beginning of rabbinical school, I tried to remember throughout rabbinical school because there are tough moments to remember this. But you said like if you're trying to be a rabbi, stop, essentially. And at first, I had no idea what you were talking about. And then when I started to spend time with my classmates, and when I was given more and more opportunity to, be a rabbi in rabbinical school, I started to understand that it's really hard sometimes to shake yourself out of it. And it's really important to rid yourself of it because no one wants or needs that. And actually, some synagogues do, but that is something that I love about Hakafa is that I feel like I can genuinely be myself.
Oh, that was a nice kiss up, and I love it on all
No, I
kind on
mean
all
it.
front. I know you do. So, okay, so you talked about coastal Judaism, and I would love to get back to you to define Chicago Judaism, but even more importantly, you're going to be you wherever you are. So, what's Anna Judaism?
Wow.
Not an interview question, just a conversation.
Hmm. Well, I think Anna Judaism is always in progress. I think it's realizing that everyone is learning and unlearning things all the time and acknowledging that we are moving pieces and we're not constantly going to continue believing or practicing the way that we do today. It might not look like that tomorrow. And I think allowing space for that type of change is really important to my type of Judaism. That it doesn't need to be something that always stays, right? We can experiment. We could try on new things, and yeah, that's very important to me.
All right, so putting you on the spot, but try it. We've been together a long time, you and me, and our relationship's evolving. In the time that you have seen me in this capacity since you've been in rabbinical school or any time, what's something you think I need to unlearn?
Oh, great. Hmm. Geez, are you really asking this?
Yeah. You just talked about we need to move forward, we need to learn and unlearn things. I'm just building on what you said. What's something that you think I need to unlearn?
Hmm. I mean, I feel like I'm really, this isn't just meant to be a compliment, but I feel like you've been really conscious about allowing space for new things to come through. And so normally I would say, like any rabbi who's been in their congregation for as long as you have needs to unlearn, keeping everything the same. But I don't feel like that's true for you. Um,
Well, if you can't come up
Gosh,
with anything yet, then we got a lot of work to do together. I'm going to
I
ask you
mean,
this in a
yeah,
year
like
from now.
we're just at the beginning. I'm like, I can't, nothing's coming to
But we're
mind.
not. But we're not at the beginning. We are. You're right. So that maybe was an unfair question. I'm not trying to make this about me. I was just reacting to the question, to the statement you
Yeah,
said.
yeah.
I mean, part of this is, I mean, when we were on our conversation earlier this week, and you proverbially rolled your eyes at me when I talked about meaning, right? I want so
Hmm.
it's not that I have to learn or unlearn meaning. What is meaning to you in a Jewish capacity and in an Anna-Jewish capacity?
I've been thinking about our conversation since we had that, by the way,
Good.
talking about mitzvah and ego. Um, Meaning for me in a Jewish context is is when people can connect to something on usually a spiritual level and they find something significant enough to enhance their life by doing whatever that thing is. So I'm thinking about what we were talking about before in commandments, and I don't know if we want to rehash part of that
Well,
here, but
we'll get there eventually. I'm not
we'll
worried
get
about
there
it.
eventually. But yeah, I mean, meaning is like a massive umbrella, right? Like there's a lot that goes under that. I think meaning can look like a lot of different things. I think it depends on the person. For me, I find I usually find things meaningful if it's attached to some sort of ritual. I'm like a ritual junkie. Really, I love it. And I think Judaism provides so much ritual, and a lot of it is stuff that we don't really do anymore. And I'm speaking like as a reform movement. Um, and I love it. And I think when you add an action to something and you add it regularly, like it becomes a habit, there's something very centering and focusing and quieting about that. And that gives me meaning.
Where does that love of ritual come from? You weren't raised with it, were you?
Not particularly. I mean, like we had, you know, we had like all of the holidays and whatnot, and of course Hakafat was massive in my childhood. But in terms of ritual, maybe not so much. I think Chabad worked wonders on me in community
Wow.
homage.
Wow.
I know I said the Cha word. um, I really fell in love with Orthodox Judaism in college, as you know, and I was really ready to throw away all of my pants. I mean, I was like taking a full dive. Um, because I think of the ritual. I fell in love with like everything. The first time that I had a Shabbaton through like, West Rogers Park, and they put you up in a house, and I was like, wow, this is like a completely different universe. And I loved it up until I realized that I couldn't sing or do any of the things I wanted to do, but I loved it. I loved the ritual pieces and the communal pieces of that.
So how can you balance? How do you balance that love of ritual and a personal attraction to it with a community in a movement that historically has
Mhm.
rejected it?
Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done there, and that really excites me. Like I think reformed Jews, or at least I'll speak for myself, I sometimes feel like that ritual can't belong to me because it's an Orthodox thing, or because I'm not signing up for the whole package, and so how am I supposed to feel ownership over doing just one piece of it? But that's not true. I mean, like we can pick and choose, and the beauty of the reform movement is informed choice, right? And so I think a lot of times we're missing the informed piece, and we don't have choices because we don't know what's out there to choose from. um at least that's the way that I felt until I realized, like what Chabad was offering me at the time, or Aish, or Jets, or like any of those organizations. And it's intoxicating because it's like this secret layer of Jewish life. And I think for me, like I pick the things that are meaningful for me, like lighting Shabbat candles every Friday night, which is not uncommon to the reform movement. Um, or, like once in a while, Yaakov and I will enjoy like an unplugged Shabbat, and we'll decide, I mean, this is like so not okay, but we'll decide like this is a good weekend for Shabbat. And then we'll do it. We'll unplug, and we'll walk, and we'll talk with friends, and it's there's just something very powerful about that. Also mikvah, like I'm a massive mikvah junkie also now. I love the mikvah. I love it.
I don't at all. I
Oh
when
my
I did
gosh.
it the first time, I know because I was telling people about it, and the first time creeped me out. So I decided to try again, and I was eh. So what
Wow. That's
so what about
interesting
Mick?
because
Yeah.
for men, it's like I feel like less creepy than for women.
Yeah, no, I just thought it was kind of bizarre. For me personally,
Wow.
I love the idea. Trust me, it's like, right? I love the idea of it. But when it came for me personally doing it, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Bath,
Wow.
okay. So
Well,
what
you're the
about,
one who converted me to it.
so what about it?
I feel like it's the best example of powerful ritual that has the potential for meaning. And there's I mean, anything with water, I feel like it usually has the potential to hold a lot of meaning. But there's something about the space of the mikvah and the time going into the room, like the prep time when you're, just you, and you're thinking through why you're there and what you're going to be doing in the water, um and you say the blessings in the water, and it's this pocket of time and place where it's just you and your thoughts
Hmm.
and the divine. And I think it's really hard to find that in life without it, right? Like it's possible completely, but it's really hard to silence like everything that's going on in our heads and in the outside. And I find that the mikveh like really helps me do that.
So why does water do that and sand not?
Hmm. Because the sand is still stuck to our feet after all these thousands of years. It's
Oh my
nothing
God, it
new.
feels so good though to be connected and rooted to that.
I think water is inherently, I think water is holier than sand. I think water can change forms much easier than sand can. I'm not a geologist, but I'm gonna say that. I think it's in the changing that there's something really powerful there.
Wow. And I see in the non-changingness the power because
Mm,
it gives me context to make me realize that I'm not such a big deal anyhow. I'm just
mhm.
part of it. I'm part of the unchanging rhythm
Wow.
of layers of existence.
And yet the water is moving though, so there's constant change.
Do you really think that there's been change in the world? Real change.
Well, in 2023, it sure doesn't feel like that. It it feels very much like we're moving backwards. But I
But still
think,
change. I didn't say moving forward. I said change.
yeah, I mean, I think there's been change. I think people have made changes, and I think society has made changes, and sometimes those changes stick, and sometimes they don't. But yeah, I think, yeah, there's change.
I, I mean, is it real change, or at the end of the day, are we all relating to each other just like our four ancestors did in the caves?
Hmm.
And it just looks different because we have AI now. I mean, it's still all about power. It's about power. It's about, in the end, it's about having your basic needs met and about power, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, don't say yeah. Push back.
Well,
Don't
I'm
tell me that you're
thinking.
depressing me by agreeing with me. Don't do that.
No, when I say yeah, it's not agreeing. It's
Okay.
hearing. I should have said I hear you. Um,
That's very Los Angeles Judaism of you.
right,
That's
there
good.
we go. There's the coastal Judaism coming through. I see you and I hear you. Um, I'll tell you what my mom says. I'll quote her. She
Okay.
says that everything is cyclical. And I really do agree with that. I think that change happens. I think sometimes it's hard to recognize that the change happens. And I think that things have a tendency to happen again, and we move backwards and we move forwards, and we're forever stuck on this, this line of moving. And I think as long as we're moving, we're okay.
Understand that when I ask the question, I know, look, the fact that you and I can have this conversation as colleagues shows that there has been change. But I don't know if that is real change or if it's actually window dressing because we're still in the same relationship as human beings as humans have always been.
I think it depends on the type of change we're talking about. Like, what do you
Yeah.
have in mind?
I don't have anything in mind. I'm just thinking it through.
No, no, but you're saying, so like the conversation that we're having now, you're saying like there's been change because we're having this conversation. So you mean like
By
the
virtue of the
gender
fact that women
roles?
can be rabbis,
Uh-huh.
right? Um, so there's change in that way.
Right.
I don't know if in the caves of old, if men and women didn't have equal space to express themselves. I don't know.
I think actually that in ancient times, I think women had a lot more power
Yeah.
than they do today. So, has there been change? Like, yeah, there's been change, but it hasn't been necessarily good change. And
Is
there's
it
there's small wins too, but
so you think there's been change at Hakafa?
in terms of
In
gender
your
roles?
just in general now, I'm going in general change. Look at the
Oh,
history of Hakafa. Do you think there's been change? Because you're coming into it. Look, your Judaism was molded, what you said before, by your experience here, and now you're coming back in a very different role. Are you coming back to the same place that you left?
mm,
And regardless of your answer, is that a good thing?
right. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is like, yes, there's definitely been change when I think of, like growing up and hearing, like Rabbi Mark's like voice in the microphone on Sunday mornings and in the big room, and like even the building that we're in, like literally has changed. Um, and I know that a lot of like the programs that we've been offering have changed, and there's different opportunities for learning in terms of like large scale, like tikkun olam, like what we're working towards as a congregation. I feel like that has stayed the same, in that the commitment to justice is like unwavering at Hakafa. And I think a lot of synagogues say that that's their thing, and it's just not true. um, at least in my experience of working with other congregations, it seems like a lot of places they feel the need to say that justice is, in their mission statement, and that all their congregants are very committed to this. But Hakafa feels like it hasn't changed, in that every congregant feels strongly about that. And that's really powerful.
So let's pretend that when you come in on July 1st, you have been given a blank check to change whatever you wanted to within your first 30 days at Hakafa.
Oof.
Looking at Hakafa, if you could change one thing to start off, and no one would get upset with you, and everyone would love you for it, what would it be?
Hmm. Okay. I would create like
I hate it. I'm kidding. Go on. I'm sorry
I
to
knew
interrupt
it. I knew it.
you. Go ahead. You would create what? Go. Go, 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 go.
um, I would create like an experiential, immersive religious school program and Hebrew school program that is inclusive of adults as well. Like I would just go wild with that. It would be
Hebrew
it would
school gone wild. Yeah.
Hebrew school gone wild. The Jews have gone wild. Yeah, that would be it would be it would be really exciting, I think, to build a program that isn't like not your parents' Hebrew school, right? Like I think one of the trickiest parts about generational Judaism is that parents tend to tell their children that they have to go through the thing because they themselves had to go through the thing. And that's like, it's extremely toxic, and it doesn't instill a sense of love for Judaism or Jewish life in children. And I think I would work towards, creating something where the congregants like would love to participate in that it's not sitting, this isn't a diss on what's currently happening, but it's not just, it doesn't feel like school, right? Because kids don't generally like school. And yeah, I think I would do something like that.
Yeah. I don't think that you're saying anything that we haven't.
Good. Great. I'll start on July 1st then.
We'll let BB know when she watch. I'm not going to let BB know until she watches this.
Who's writing the check? Let's do it.
All right. So when you, it is, I don't want to understate or overstate, but particularly here, understate the significance of you coming back. I think it is a real, it's a real blessing for us. We all think, I mean, and it's already gone to your head. We all think you're a superstar, and we're worried about you having to live up. That you feel like you're going to have to live up to that.
That's why I have to go to the mikveh a lot to do that.
That's great. Oh, get a lot of meaning out of that one, because it's not it's not, even if you weren't a superstar, which you are, but coming back to the congregation that you grew up in is a big deal, and it can be fraught. Are you worried about anything?
You know, I have this conversation with so many people out here in Los Angeles
Oh, but
because
that's a different. They're blah blah blah. Go ahead.
no, but about myself, like about coming back home, because I say, you know, I'm about to head back home to the congregation I grew up at, and everyone goes, "Oh my gosh, that's like so beautiful and amazing." And I say, "Yes, it completely is. I'm very excited." And of course, I realize that there's a challenge, and the challenge is I was a little girl, like running through the hallways of Hakafa and probably screaming and disrupting and like all the things. But beyond that, this is my home and this is my community, and that's partly why I love Hakafa so much. But within that is the challenge of how is this community going to view me as a rabbi? Um, and not the little girl who had her bat mitzvah with Hakafa. And so I think there's growing pains there. And I think there's also a whole other gender piece to this. But
Don't butt that. Speak that. Say more about that.
um, well, obviously I identify as a woman. And so I think coming in as Congregation Hakafa's first rabbi who happens to be a woman. Oh, second, you're right. Okay, but for a long time, in a long time, um, it has its inherent challenges, right? Like, and within that, having multiple rabbis on a team together has challenges anyway, for the congregants, right? Like, who do they talk to for this? Who do they go to for that? If they ask one rabbi one thing, how does that make the other rabbi feel? I mean, there's like a lot to navigate there. And then when you throw the gender piece into it, um, I know that I have a lot of work to do within myself, of figuring out what it means to be a rabbi who's a woman. Because though I've been in rabbinical school for 5 years, I really I haven't been viewed as the rabbi of a congregation yet. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that comes with that as a woman, and as a woman who's, you know, raising a baby as well.
Have you talked to folks out in the field about that?
Yes, and you know, it's funny. I This was such an anxiety of mine all through rabbinical school, is how am I going to be a mom, the mom that I want to be, and the rabbi I want to be, because they felt mutually exclusive, for very long, up until very recent, up until it happened, up until I became a mom. And I asked my rabbinic mentor to pair me with someone who I could talk to about this, because I was like, I need to know everything so that I could take every note in the world so that when it happens, when I become a mom, I can know what I'm doing. So they did that, and I had these conversations with this rabbi who is a woman, and she told me like all the things, right? She told me, oh, this is what works for me. This is how I do this. This is blah, 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 blah. And at the end of every phone call, I would hang up with her and be like, oh gosh, this sounds awful. Like, I was truly miserable. Like, Yaakov would have to console me at the end of each phone call. And it took me about 6 phone calls with this really wonderful person to help me realize that I am never going to figure out what is best for me by talking with other rabbis out in the field about what works best for them. It just can't work like that, because everyone's different and everyone has their own groove. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm still in that, right? Like, I'm just at the very beginning of figuring out how to balance all of the things. And it's in flux constantly as life changes.
Yeah, for me, it's not balancing being a parent and being a rabbi. You said the mother you want to be and the rabbi you want to be.
Yeah.
This is my broken record. To me, it's balancing the kind of parent you want to be, the kind of mother you want to be, and the kind of Jew you want to be.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because the rabbi, right, that's that whole thing you said at the beginning.
Right.
The rabbi is just the opportunity. People are going to pay you to be Jewish. They're not paying you to be a rabbi. They're paying you to be Jewish. And for you to share that that you,
Mhm.
not the rabbi, but the you. How are you balancing being the Jew that you want to be right now and being the parent you want to be?
Hmm. It's really hard. Like I think a lot of pieces of the Jew I've wanted to be have taken a back seat since becoming a mom.
Hmm.
And when I said before about rabbi, I meant really like the logistical pieces of that,
I
right?
know,
Like
I
the
know, I know,
hours.
I know.
um, but I think the way that Yaakov and I would celebrate Shabbat, for example, has completely changed. And and as like like we usually try to get Sally on Zoom when I'm not leading, and that's our Shabbat practice now. Like Sally tries to grab the computer and we move it further and further away and we listen to you and whoever's, singing that night. And like that has become our Shabbat practice. That and, blessing Solomon, like that has been something new that has felt very fulfilling for me as a Jewish person. Having the opportunity to just like kiss him and bless him and thank God for him every Shabbat. Um, and there's a lot of things that I'm missing out on. We used to shul hop here, and it was so much fun. I mean,
Hmm.
it was just getting tastes of so many different congregations out here, ones that we did not gel with at all, and ones that were really exciting and we liked participating in. And we haven't gotten to do that since he was born because bedtime is at 7. And it's
For you or
really
for
hard.
Saleh? For you or for Saleh, right?
Mine's at 6.
Yeah. Okay. So rumor has it that Friday night you spoke about Pesach and about Pesach being about a reaffirmation of the love affair, the love between God and Israel.
Yes,
Fair?
that's fair.
Okay. And you just talked about God again. What's your God concept?
Ooh.
Because I could never have given that sermon. I didn't hear it. I can never give that
Because
sermon.
you don't believe that about the Seder?
Well, that's different. But just even in talking about the love affair between God and the Jewish people, I talk about that in the context of a wedding.
Mhm.
But so I want you to talk. Go ahead.
Okay.
What's God
Okay,
to
well,
you?
I think it's like a very rocky love affair, by the way.
Yeah.
It's like you got to buckle your seatbelt for that one. Um, Now I forgot the question because I was thinking
What's
about
your
talking
God
about the love
concept?
affair. Oh my God concept.
What's your love affair with God? How about that? Either way, go ahead.
Um, I believe that God is inside all of us, whether we believe that or not. I believe God is in even the most, you know, off the derech people. Um, and I believe that we all have the potential and ability to tap into the divine if we choose to do so. Um, I believe that our relationship could be very complicated at times. It could also even be non existent, but it's still present. That the desire, at least from God, I believe, is always there for us to connect to
Oh,
God.
that's presumptuous. How would you know?
Well, because God has written a lot of stuff about what God wants from
God
us.
hasn't written anything. No, no. Why do you think? No, I'm actually serious. Why do you think that that God wants that of us, or that? Yeah.
Because if we're going off of this love story, right, which is what we talked about on Friday night, then there's a ketubah contract for that love story. And while we all know that members of marriages can always choose to not be in that contract anymore, I believe that we don't. I believe that God wants us to stay in contract with God.
Do you really
I,
feel that?
yeah, I
What
really do.
what does that feel like?
It feels like it feels like a presence that is always available, even if we don't want or need it.
Hmm.
That's what it feels like for me. I think, like I was just with a wedding couple before this, and they were talking about how they both don't the Jewish wedding couple, and they don't believe in God.
You didn't. Once you said that, I knew they were Jewish. Go
Okay.
ahead. Go on.
I suppose that's obvious.
Yeah.
um and they both didn't believe in God. And then we talked about like what that truly means, because I think a lot of people say that they don't believe in God, but then it turns out that they actually do believe in some sort of element of that divine presence, or something that's divinely greater than them, that is godlike in my eyes. And so I think a lot of people are still stuck in the like God is on a cloud with a beard idea. I believed that for a long time. And it's really, there's no wiggle room with that theology.
So you believe in a personal God?
Yeah, I'm an I thou person, I suppose. Yeah, I do, but I believe in a personal God.
Hmm.
Do
I don't.
you? I have anything to say.
Well, yeah. I mean, what I would say is, first of all, I don't believe that the ketubah is between me and God. I believe that the ketubah is between God and the Jewish people, and so therefore my responsibility is to the Jewish people and not to my personal relationship with God. So
Right.
that's so in that sense, I see the whole thing as metaphor,
Right, of course.
right? And I'm more of a panentheist.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe everything's in God, and so our existence is all interconnected, intertied, and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And I also believe that if I actually believe anything, it's not right because it's beyond what I can. So I have no right to. So as I said at Rosh Hashanah, right? I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, who knows? No one knows. But I agree with you in that it is when I say personal God, that's not negating the community. That's not at least what I intended. That
oh,
just because there's a personal connection doesn't mean that there's not an obligation to community in that ketubah contract too.
yeah, but I can't even understand what you mean by a personal connection. I mean, is that because isn't that just a mere? And that mere is a sounds very patronizing, and I apologize. It wasn't intended, but I'm gonna use it anyhow. Isn't that just a mere reflection then of your hopes and desires? So isn't that God just a reflection of your greatest, truest self, and therefore not God at all?
But if you believe in a communal God, then you're just believing in what you think the community feels. It's just a larger version of the personal,
No,
right?
because I think, as I said, I think it's metaphor. I think that what's most important is that I am part of a context that's bigger, that's in relationship to something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as long as I stay within my concern, humbly, I hope. We all know how much ego it takes to be humble. Humbly, I hope, right, to my commitment to you
Mm-hmm.
and to use,
Mm-hmm.
I can get my head around that.
Yeah. And you're saying you can't get your head around that I believe in God is X, Y, and Z. And so and I realize that that's a reflection of my own wants and needs.
Again, it sounds really patronizing and condescending that I put it that way, but I'm saying it to you as an honest and pill pull, not as judgment.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Not as dishonest judgment. No, I'm kidding, not as
Right.
judgment.
Right.
Because
Here's
you're go on,
here
go.
okay, so one of my things I have about God conversations is that it always feels like there needs to be a winning answer, right? Like
No,
one over the other. And I truly believe in everything that you said, and I don't actually think what I said is too much different. So I wonder, like, God must be all of those things, right?
again,
Like,
well, I think that's presumptuous again of to put that God must be that.
yeah,
Who knows?
who
Who knows?
knows? Who knows? But whatever whatever inspires us to commit to the community and to a greater God and gives us meaning in our life, then that is working, right? Like that must be what's working for that person who believes that.
What's the conversation you think we as, well, Jewish community is too big, we as Hakafah should be having?
About God?
No, no, about anything. What is an
Ooh.
important conversation that we should be having?
Hmm. I think congregations, uh, because I'm not there yet, I don't particularly know if this work has been done yet. So tell me if it has. But um, I think, um, conversations around gender fluidity and, trans rights and pronouns and, anything under that umbrella, that very large umbrella, is so important right now because so many Jews are hurting and feeling on the outside of their own communities because I think very well-meaning people don't know how to include them in community because they don't really understand.
So why about gender fluidity and not about race?
Well, that's two. But if I had to pick one in this moment,
Yeah, so
I
I'm
mean,
asking.
race is completely
So,
different. Yeah.
but why? I mean, look, on an intersectional level, it's all about vulnerable populations of people who have been traditionally excluded
Right.
being able to not have a seat at the table, but to be creating the table collectively with us, right?
Yeah.
So why that one in particular right now?
Well, I believe,
Which I happen to agree with you, by the way, but go ahead.
yeah, yesterday I think was Trans Visibility Day, so that was at the forefront of my mind. But I think particularly my classmates here in Los Angeles, many of them have gender identities that I think congregations are hesitant to embrace because they don't know how. And so it's been very much a focus of my unlearning and learning in my education at HUC, of how to create spaces to welcome them, and also just like bearing witness to the pain in the stories that they tell me about. I mean, one of my classmates cannot get a job. I mean, they have been turned away from every congregation, and
Not because
when
of talent.
no, I mean, this one congregation had asked them, um, do you have anything else to talk about other than trans stuff? Which, like, they had a lot of things to talk about, I'm sure, but it's just it's a really big issue in the Jewish community right now. Not that race isn't, but this is it's in my world very presently.
So, as a white cisgender, however you can define yourself,
Yeah,
you've had to navigate a really interesting space. How's that been for you?
I've made so many mistakes. Oh my gosh, I've made so many mistakes. And I'm grateful for the mistakes and aware of the pain that my mistakes caused. Um, I think, just learning new language around gender is a really important big step. And when I first really was, when I first entered into this world, which is new to me, it was my year in Israel. And part of what I was learning was that, well, as we know, anyone who is conversant in Hebrew knows that there's gendered endings, right? Like you have to choose if something is feminine or masculine. And I couldn't, I mean, it was so new for me to wrap my head around being part of a world where you have to choose one in the words that you're saying. Like the book has to be masculine. I mean, it's truly mind-blowing. We don't have that
Yeah.
in English. A flower is a flower. It doesn't have to be masculine or feminine. And so that was really my first taste of like, wow, this is so painful. And I remember some folks in my class were trying to like create new, I think there's like an initiative now doing it, but create new Hebrew words around this with new endings. Um,
I don't know why they just don't get rid of one of them. Get
like
rid of the
on the
masculine.
masculine.
Yeah, get rid of the masculine. And in gendered languages. I don't know. I mean, that's to me the
Yeah.
simple solution.
The Haredi Jews in Israel would love that.
Well, they speak Yiddish anyhow.
Yeah, it's true. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I messed up a lot and I still mess up. I mess up a lot all the time and I get nervous sometimes and I think, "Oh my gosh, am I going to say this right?" But the intention is there.
So, as you said 20 minutes ago, half hour ago, whatever it was, you fell in love with Orthodox ritual through Chabad until you realized that you couldn't participate in the way that you would like to. And yet, your ideal, I would imagine your ideal Shabbats also involved a traditional Shabbat dinner. And what does Yaakov do Eshet Chayil with you?
No,
See,
I told him he can't.
he won't. So here's my question again.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate your love of tradition with the reality of the paternalism, misogyny, whatever you want to call it, that's inherent in those rituals that you embrace? And can you, in good faith, just say, "Oh, it doesn't really mean that"?
No, I mean, right, you can't in good faith say it doesn't really mean that because I believe it does. It does mean that. I think there's room for reinventing them if you're okay with doing that. So I know that like there was a project at HUC about rewriting Eshet Chayil and what that could look like. But you have to realize in doing that that like it is no longer Eshet Chayil. Then it's like a lovely poem that you could read to your beloved to thank them. It's it's not what it used to be. So I think for me, in my identity, I find the things that I find the rituals that don't irritate me. And the ones that do, like maybe I massage them a little bit and I change them. And the ones that irritate me, sometimes I sit with them for a while. Like I thought the mikvah was the like, oh my gosh, like you're gonna separate by gender and like what is, I really was not on board for a while. And it irritated me. And then one day it didn't irritate me. And also, Yaakov knows this. One of my biggest regrets about our wedding is I put up such a fight about not having a bedekin and a tish because I was like, I don't want to have separate genders. And what is this, traditional, whatever. There's no space for anything in between. And we didn't have one. And now I so regret it. Because I think there's a way of appreciating the beauty of certain things and then either making peace with the things that don't sit right or changing them and like discarding them, right? Like
There's
for a
there's no
tish and bedekin, like you don't need to separate by gender if you don't
no
want to.
no.
Yeah. Right. So you tweak it, and then you still have like the oomph of it, right? That's my very reform answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's an inch as one, speaking of you and your who loves ritual, that's got to be a real challenge.
Yeah.
And, Sarah and I used to talk all the time early on about this is so 2000, 2002, when the language of the prayer book was still predominantly he, how we saw it as metaphor, so we didn't see what the big deal was. And we could still be insensitive because it was still a PC to be insensitive around that. And I was talking to a woman who agreed with me, right? And so when I was in the Dominican Republic with all these other rabbis from all these other movements, and all of a sudden they started singing songs to God using feminine language, and I've heard it all before, and I used to dismiss it, ego, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, you can do this, and it's okay. So for me, one who has always been stuck in the silos of ritual has to be this and about this, and me on the one hand navigating that as someone who came out of the conservative movement, but also rejecting rather than seeing evolution for what it is, it took a lot. And it's always a struggle for me on both levels. So opening up to, of course, God's not a male. So why can't we just use male language? Because it's not really a male. Seeing how small that was,
Mhm.
I was so thankful for that trip to the Dominican Republic on a number of levels, and that was a major one. And in terms of ritual, my breaking free from not wearing I don't wear a talit anymore except when certain occasions, because I was able to give myself permission around ritual to not do just to do regardless of thought. I don't know if that makes sense.
Hmm. So you're saying that trip gave you permission to let go of just doing something because it didn't need to matter what it was attached
The
to.
trip let me go of needing to call God he,
Hmm. Yeah.
for sure. I gave lip service to it beforehand, but I
Yeah.
was like, dude, that's not even your God concept. Let it go. And it actually opened my God concept actually.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I get stuck in that too. I still refer to God as he, and then as I'm saying it, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't believe that. And I think that's like a microcosm of like the gender conversation too, that like our language doesn't necessarily align with our ideology a lot of the time, and it takes rewiring our brains to realize that they're not aligned.
I we did a Torah class at Stacy Solotarovsky's house almost 15 years ago when we were talking. We must have been in, I don't remember where we were in the text, and we were talking about how my definition of religion is superstition codified.
Mm.
And I brought a talit, and or maybe it was in Minyan that I did this. No, no, maybe it was in Minyan where I did this. I'm sorry. At Minyan, I had the talit on, one or the other. And all of a sudden, I took it off and just dropped it on the ground. Yeah, see what your face just did, right?
Yeah, yeah.
To make a point that it is just a cloth around my shoulder. Why do I own this ritual that traditionally didn't allow women to have access? And so I just let it go and dropped it to make the point that it's just superstition or ritual. It's kind of silly,
Yeah.
and I freaked internally because I'm like, oh, how can I do this? And then I freaked about how could I care this much about it? So this dynamic about ritual, I don't know if I'm making sense because I don't think I am,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
you're spurring this dynamic about my attraction to it and then my repulsion to it because of the absurdity of it.
Yeah.
I'm in constant battle with it. I almost wore the talit for the first time again on this Shabbat at Minyan. Almost.
Wow. I didn't know that you had that relationship with Talit.
Oh my
I didn't.
God! Particularly the one that I wear. Rona bought it for me my year in Jerusalem,
Mhm.
and to me, it's just always been an embrace that included not just her love, but more than that, right?
Okay, so I'm gonna jump off of that because I think that for me is like part of what makes the doing of the ritual so meaningful, right? Like it wasn't just a talit for you. It was like Rona's love and gift embracing you. And actually, you don't remember this, I bet, but a long time ago, confirmation class, I think, you were talking about sports with someone, and I don't know what to say about sports. I barely know that the Cubs are in Chicago. And I said something like, "Who cares? It's just sports or something." And you were like "Just sports?" And then you said something like, "One day you're going to realize like it's not about sports. It's actually about so much more than watching the football game on TV or whatever it is." And really, like I've kept that. You probably don't remember saying that to me, but like I've kept that with me my whole life because I'm like, first of all, I was like, what is he talking about? It really is just sports. But also,
I happen to agree with you, but go ahead.
but also, I started realizing like, why is this person the way they are? And it's because there's so much else at play. And so ritual or wearing your talit or whatever it is, it's more than just the thing. Like, yeah, it's a piece of cloth, but it's about remembering that your grandpa gave it to you on your bar mitzvah, and that his, you're carrying on his memory by wearing it. There's all these other emotional pieces, and that's what makes ritual so powerful, I think, is letting those emotions come in and those memories.
Then why do you think, according to Jewish tradition, but Olam Haba, there will be no more ritual in the world to come, if it's so important?
My guess would be that because whatever we have in Olam Haba is enough that we don't need to be longing for a better world anymore.
Longing for my grandfather's embrace is different than longing for a better world.
But you would have both in Olam Haba.
Oh, we're going to hang out with Gramps. I'm going to be hanging out with Gramps. You're right. Oh, yeah.
They're already there.
And Ohio State will win the national championship every year, so you'll understand. I get it.
I mean, I hear it. I hear it's a smashing place.
Oh, my God. Oh, well, listen. So I want to, we could keep going. And so we brought back points on the circle. You are the first one to bring it back to, and it's appropriate because hopefully someday you'll be doing some of these too. Add it to your list of everything we have for you to be doing. I feel really, truly honored, and for a long time, even when you were a kid, truly honored to have you in my life, and truly honored that Hakafa has the honor of having you back here. Just don't screw it up. No, I'm kidding.
It is for me. I mean, this is the most emotional homecoming because I feel so privileged to return. Really, it's the best teshuva yet.
and you're returning to a really special place. You really are. So I've already told a number of people that on Slichot, you and I are going to take the same text and argue the opposite things, whatever we use the same text.
Oh,
so
fun.
We got to come up with that. But
Perfect.
Look, I hope that you'll find our relationship will always be like this. And I hope that you'll find this with each and every person in our community and in your life. And as I will say to you at ordination, which I get to come to, woo!
Yeah.
Right? What I will say to you is something along those lines, is that what makes you a rabbi is not the piece of paper. The piece of paper just allows you to be called that. But what makes you a rabbi is you. And everything that you sparkle with. Sparkle? No, wrong word. Spark.
I like sparkle.
Sparkle. Okay, sparkle. There you go. Oh, how to kill the moment. Oh, that's going to play really well on this one. If anyone makes it to the end of this, I'm going to hear about that.
And then in the pews, they'll say, "Did he say sparkle?"
All right. I want you to give me the final word. What is your parting thought that you want to offer? If you know that your mother is watching to the end, what is the one thing that you want her to hear from you? And don't let it be, if it's wet and not yours, don't touch it. Give it to me. Come on. What is it?
Oh,
your final word.
I believe it would just be one of deep gratitude, that I feel so lucky to have the life that I have and to have the opportunities that I have. And I'm very, very excited to build and connect and just be here. So thank you.
Really. I can't wait for you to say that after you've been here for a while too.
Then I'll say, I'm so tired. And it's not from the baby.
That concludes this episode of Points on the Circle. Looking forward to the next one. See you next time, everyone.